There's a unique, restless energy to early summer as we limber up to the solstice. Long, light evenings and late suppers give the feeling that the days and life itself are being stretched and enhanced. Everything is playing out in Technicolor. London's front gardens are bursting with yellow roses and lush foliage. It creates a productive, lively mood, which urges you to tick off those to-do lists and create new projects. In this spirit, this episode of the show is a colourful, lively and compelling lineup of new brands, perspective-shifting literature, history and the art of scent. We'll journey to Dakar in Senegal to meet Khadija Aisha, who uses maximalist designs and bold graphics to create garments for her brand L'Artisan. We'll chat to Claridge's resident archivist about the hotel's unique art-deco heritage. And we'll spend an afternoon with Gambian-Swedish perfumer Maya Njie, whose work blends precision with deep personal narrative, from the cardamom lace recollections of the Nordic kitchens of her youth to the earthy warmth of West African vetiver. This is Confect Corner, and I'm your host, Sophie Grove.
I'm inspired a lot by, the old ladies who's selling at the market, what they're selling, what they're wearing also, how they layer things. So I'm inspired by just layers, so I need to see it. I need to walk on the street.
You're suddenly in this wonderland of mirrors and reflections and diffused lighting, and it is magical. And I think that is what makes it feel magical, because it's such a beautiful space.
It started with prints and patterns, me really delving into colour combinations based on photographs, and then being really curious about how you could really push the boundaries of art and make it multi-sensory.
Welcome to Confect Corner. I'm your host, Sophie Grove, here in London, and I'm joined, as ever, by Gillian de Baest here in the studio and by our style director, Marcella Palek, in Zurich. Hello to you both.
Hello, Sophie, and to you, Marcella and Zurich.
Hello, Sophie and Gillian.
Well, as listeners will know, we like to start with a little show and tell. Gillian, let's begin with you this month. What do you have for us? I know you've been on the road in Venice, but you've been doing a little bit of reading while you've been travelling.
Well, yes, I was very torn what my discovery to talk about. But the problem is with Venice Architecture Biennale, I could fill the whole programme with what I discovered. So I'm going to slip into a quieter moment, which is this book I picked up and I haven't been able to put down since. It's Nigel Slater's 1,000 Feasts, and the little subtitle is Small Moments of Joy. And that is exactly what it is. So all through his life, separate from his kitchen diaries, he just writes notes on whatever he finds, whatever pieces, notebooks, papers he finds. And they're the quiet moments observed of honey dripping over Greek cheese and the little puddles and dimples it makes, to tearing the flesh off a mango in a monsoon. Right from his travels, the more exotic ones, Tehran, Japan, India, to just here in his kitchen in England, the beauty of a spoon. And he just looks at the spoon and the curvature of the spoon and what it feels like on the mouth and the difference between a wooden spoon and a silver spoon. And I just found this so beautifully written, but the minutiae of the detail so hypnotic. And it kind of reminds me about, the importance of just not letting the moments pass and observing life. But also, I think, why I love travelling on my own so much and why I don't mind going out to dinner on my own. Because you notice things in a completely different way.
He's an incredibly perceptive writer, and you can see this every ritual. But the textures, you're right, because I love his Kitchen Diaries book, which is really just a kind of life in recipes. But sometimes he'll just talk for 500 words about plums and just the shape of them, buying them. It's really detailed. The ritual of just everyday life, just the completely quotidian march to the corner shop. In his world is poetry.
And he has my sense of humour. Like, he was describing this seafood dish in South Korea or something, and he says, you can either think of it as a piece of art or it could remind you of The Exorcist. But he can be very poetic and very whimsical, but also a very sort of British dry sense of humour, which makes me chuckle.
Well, enough of Nigel. Marcella, I know you've been shooting. We've just sent Confect Summer to press, and you were at the helm leading a group of people to Cairo for an amazing reportage of all the kind of best ensembles of the summer. Tell us what you discovered there.
So yes, indeed. Our big fashion shoot for Confect Summer took place in breathtaking Cairo. And shortly before heading back to London with my 3 XL suitcases filled with wonderful summer looks and luxury fashion, I went to the Zamalek neighborhood on the Nile Island, where many stunning embassies, a few excellent Egyptian restaurants, and some nice hidden stores are located. Madou Boutique is one of them and offers beautiful linens, homeware and fine Egyptian cotton, glassware, ceramics and more, all made by local artisans. Really stunning place. I felt like discovering a secret spot in an elegant quarter with huge lush trees and the Nile River in walking distance. It felt like a dream, actually. So, of course, we have to shop there. My colleague bought a beautiful, huge bed throw and a marble mortar, and me, with experience a little bit more with a lot of luggage, I found a thin scarf with fine embroidery, as I think you never can have enough scarves, and there is always place for it in the luggage.
Well, you only need one marble pestle and mortar in your life. I think that's probably,
true.
we can all agree on. I think it's a bold statement, big commitment there for Millie to go and buy that and
Yes.
ship it back, especially given
Yes.
the kind of what you were weighing in anyway. That's amazing.
Oh, Marcella, I really now want to book a flight to Cairo. I've never been. But did you sense this store was catering to the residents of that Cairo Egyptian neighborhood? Do you think there was something a little place specific about the selection?
Yes, of course. You can really feel these different linens, different styles than we are used from Paris and European stores. And somehow you can feel that people are using it there in this Zamalek neighborhood. You know, that's what I loved so much, that there are beautiful apartments, villas and houses, but you have a sense that people are using those things. And then you can take a bit of it home, so this is really very special.
Well, you can read all about it also in Confect Summer, because we did a little outpost page on some of the best spots to go and seek out for your trip.
And Sophie, what have you come across that you'd like to share?
Well, just before we started our production run for the magazine, I went off to Como, which was an amazing trip. And I had that kind of really dreamy solo trip along the lake, and I started reading Hotel du Lac by Anita Bruckner. I was really having that moment. And then we came back, and I've been editing the magazine, and one of the stories, which is about night trains, really captured my imagination. But I've also made this journey, and it's one of those trips that makes you feel very like you're in a novella. You start in Hungary, in Budapest, and then board the night train, which used to be used by the Hungarian Postal Services management sector in the 1980s, and then takes you to the Adriatic, takes you to Split, and then you hop on a ferry and go to Hvar. I did it probably 20 years ago, but it stayed with me, and it's kind of become that kind of storytelling, that nostalgia I feel for that trip as a kind of formative experience. Sometimes travel can be an adventure or an escape, and sometimes it just changes you. And I think sometimes it's also about how you travel. Whether or not you're on a boat or on a slow train, it kind of alters your perception. So there are lots of stories in the issue that are about that sense of memory, nostalgia, but also creating new episodes. So I'm urging people to buy it and read it. Everything about Dakar-based Khadija Aisha Bar's designs screams unbridled maximalism. The clothes she makes with her brand L'Artisan are all about clashing patterns, voluminous shapes, and deliberately oversized proportions. In their aesthetic and heritage, they feel like contemporary reinterpretations of West African dress, but their mission goes beyond appearance only.
Ba is determined to celebrate the handmade crafts that may be commonplace in Senegal, but are frequently not as appreciated as they should be. With her one-of-a-kind garments made with unique fabrics she hunts in the city's markets, she's enticing a new generation to rethink traditional outfits and attracting customers from all over the world.
Confect's deputy editor Chiara Mella headed to her studio and shop in Dakar to find out more.
It began like 15 years ago. The shop 4 years ago. It was serendipity because it wasn't meant to be. I always say that I thought that I would have been either a lawyer or, like the chief marketing executive or like a big brand, with my Starbucks mugs and things like that. So I've never imagined I would have I would have doing like what I love like for a living. What I can say is like, I wouldn't imagine, for example, like stars or people like that gonna be like into, boo-boos. What I can say is that I would not imagine like boo-boo can change a life. So this is what I can say. And maybe also it showed me that things are like object or material are not like just an object. It can have an history. It can transfer like a mood. It can make somebody feel better. It can make also somebody like, have like his identity.
Well, you touched on something like an item that is integral, I think, to l'artisan, which is the boubou. Can you please tell us why you were drawn to this specific garment, what it reminds you of, and what kind of approach have you taken to the very traditional boubou to make it into a l'artisan type of boubou?
I'm a visual person. It's like when I see a fabric, I know what I'm gonna do about it. But the boubou, like I was more into the embroidery. So generally, I don't know, I was like obsessed by my grandpa's embroidery back in the days, and I was wearing it. I don't know why. Maybe I was close to him, so maybe it was like a link to him, or he was alive. So at that time, so maybe it's a link to him. And also, I think that there is a part where I was not wearing my grandma's boubou, but my grandpa, because I love like how men are like wearing things. But I think that the boubou is I don't know. It's you cannot like really define it, and I like also that. It depends on the person who's wearing it. It's so personal. It depends on the embroidery and how they were wearing it also. They were using like, bazin generally, or jesner, or maybe cotton or hartum. And I tried to put it like in a funky way, by using the camouflage, by using like a burger, like only like a burger boubou. So you have like the correlation between something that was existing and something that never exists. So
you said there that the boubou is very universal, but at the same time is very culturally specific. So what does it mean for you to be taking this specific item? You were saying before that somebody told you, you made me feel like I could wear a boubou again. Why do you think people stopped wearing boubous, and why is it so important that they do?
I think that evolution of life. We were colonized by French people, so the complex also, modernity. Sometimes you have like things are evolving, and maybe you don't do the difference between what you have to leave and what you have to keep. So maybe there was like not a misunderstanding or something that make people like, wear more modern things, and also what people are thinking about you. Because I know, for example, that when I was wearing my headscarf, people were making fun of me. But it was like I was 15 maybe, or 12, I think, when I started having a headscarf on my head. And my cousin were like, "You're not coming with us, right, with this on your head." Or when you wear like your grandpa's clothes, they are like, "Oh, you weird. Why are you wearing this? It's like so oldish. It's giving like, it's giving your grandpa." So I think that if people were thinking that when I was 15, at that time, I've never seen like somebody wear a boubou or having a headscarf. Even when I was wearing boubous at the university. So I've always wear that because I was comfy in it. But I think that it was like a part of me. It's like when you come from a country and you like something because this is what you like, or this is what you know actually. I mean, if you don't wear the boubou, who's gonna wear the boubou? I think that somebody said that, oh, you must have a really strong personality to like still wear it while people were mocking you. But I did not really have that feeling because I like it. So It was just that I was comfortable with it. So, and I think that it's important, like, to hold our culture and to preserve it. So,
what about your design process? We spent a lot of time yesterday in the markets looking for fabric. So how does it work for you? Do you just need to see a fabric and then something appears in your mind? Or how do you go about sourcing these fabrics?
I need to see the fabric and I need to touch the fabric, because I have some supplier who sent me, like, by WhatsApp, and I said, oh, I like the pattern, and I touch it and I don't like it. So sometimes they are like, you need to delegate some stuff. Obviously, definitely I'm not gonna delegate choosing fabrics, and material, because in the process of searching I can find something else that I wasn't looking for. And also, like, just the mood of the market is me. It's messy, it's crowded, but, the vibe. Sometimes you ask me, like, about my inspiration. I'm inspired a lot by, the old ladies who's selling at the market, what they're selling, what they're wearing also, and how they layer things. So, and this is how I know also that I'm inspired by just layers. So I need to see it. I need to walk on the street. I need to go to Disneyland. Disneyland, the market for me is Disneyland. I cannot explain, but the energy, the vibe, the noise, and everything, is talking to me.
But also, how do you decide what it's going to be? Like, do you see it in your mind immediately? Okay, you're drawn to a fabric and you can immediately imagine what you're going to do with it? Or do you just take it to the workshop and then figure it out there?
40% I know what I'm going to do with it. And as far as I buy fabrics by myself, sometimes I see something and I know that it will match with something else that I have. Or I see something and I'm like, oh my God, it's the same, they are brothers and sisters. And sometimes, I can have fabrics that I know that it's going to give something. And I know that it's going to give something. And I know that if I put this and this together, it's going to be something.
So l'artisan is obviously you. You are the titular artisan. But there are lots of other artisans who are actually working sort of behind the scenes of this, And how important was it for you to make sure that these people were recognized and that their work in this context in Dakar is actually appreciated? How important is it for you that everything is handmade here in Dakar?
Oh, in the beginning, I was working with them because I'm in Dakar, and the same way I knew that wearing a bubu or selling a bubu can have an impact on a generation or on people. I've learned that making them work is a way to keep the handcrafted part of Dakar, and it show that it's not that oldies, and they can be proud of what they're doing. The leather guy that we saw yesterday, I used to tell him I don't understand why you're not teaching your kids to do this. He said, I don't want my kids to do this. The box guy, he's still in the same mood. It's been 10 years I've been telling him, you should train your kids to do this. He said, never, ever. I want her to be, a big lawyer. I want her to be a big this. We don't have here that culture of transmitting transmitting craft to the next generation, because they're not seeing seeing it as something successful. So I'm trying to keep that handcrafting things going. And also show her, even when we were working for the 19M, she was like, oh my God, finally what I'm doing is important. And I wanted her to know that what you're doing is important. Stitches, it's handmade, but it's important. It depends on how you present it and what you do out of it. So, and that these artisans are so crazy because you met them. Even me, I learned that it's the first time they're doing, even the leather guy. The first time I asked him I want a pink inside. He said, pink inside. I've never made pink inside in my life. So, and the other one, the Gore, he's gonna be I've never done this kind of jewelry, this kind of accessories. So I can see also that they're having fun with this. They laugh at me, but at the end they're oh my God, this kind of beautiful, and they're proud of what they're doing.
Khadija Aisha Bar, founder of L'Artisan, in conversation with Confect's deputy editor, Chiara Mella in Dakar. This is Confect Corner. Our next guest is Maya Njie, a perfumer whose work blends precision with deep personal narrative. Born in Västerås to Swedish and Gambian parents, and now based in London, Njie crafts fragrances that are as evocative as they are elegant, each inspired by family photographs, distant places, and moments recalled through scent.
Since launching her eponymous brand in 2016, she's become known for perfumes that are unique and emotionally charged. From cardamom-laced recollections of Nordic kitchens to the earthy warmth of West African vetiver, Njie's creations invite us into a world where memory, culture and craftsmanship converge.
Earlier, I headed down to her Shoreditch studio to explore the art of olfactory storytelling and discover how a photograph, a place, or even a leather chair can be a starting point for something unforgettable.
Initially, when I started the brand, it was very much about looking at my own heritage and my collection of photographs that stem back through my family history, and then to try and reimagine what that could have been like mixed in with the memories that I have and the experiences that I have. So initially worked from family photos not taken by me. But if anything, I found that super interesting. And initially that was actually prints and patterns. And then fragrance kind of fed into the design process.
And your own background, so you have Gambian heritage, but you were raised in Sweden. Tell us about how your memories of your own family roots, your childhood experiences have informed the brand, and maybe some really specific memories or cues for you as a creative person. It'd be interesting to hear about that context.
Well, the first fragrances that I released, they feel like they definitely linked to Scandinavia and Sweden, particularly. Cardamom is a note for me that feels super nostalgic. And it's something that I would have smelt in many different places. But my mum would bake a lot, so that's like the immediate connection. But in any typically Swedish household, you would come across cardamom, I would say. And then the combination of vanilla with that just reinforces it more. But then I have, my father's side is Gambian and Senegalese. And so since I was 6, I used to go to Gambia. And it was always interesting for me to exchange Sweden in the colder months for like the hotter climate in Gambia. And it's like, a real different culture, different smells. There's some connections too and crossovers, like both places feel really woody. So cedar wood and sandalwood, those types of notes I would say you'd find in both. A note that I really connect to my childhood and my grandfather would be tobacco. But again, leathery tobacco is also something that you will smell when you walk around in the Gambia. You can draw parallels, and maybe that's how different people formulate. They mix their experiences and combine them in the only way that they know how,
Now, it's really interesting that you have this incredible wall of photographs and it's like a scrapbook, a little montage here that I can see you. There's a Malik Sabide post little vignette there. And then here on the left, there's this beautiful wooden cabinet with photos really juxtaposed next to the scents, which is actually just really intriguing to me because you can see how, these images almost directly sort of led the way in terms of the scent, which is so unusual. I wondered whether you could talk us through some of these images. For instance, this one, there's a little girl and with an older guy.
So this frame is of my grandfather in his apartment, and the little girl is my sister, my older sister. So this was taken in the late 60s, so it's quite a while before I was born. I love the composition. It was taken by my uncle, and he was a hobbyist photographer, and I think he had a really good eye. Even though my sister's facing forwards, it's taken a profile of my granddad, so the combination of the two is really strong. Then one of the earliest memories is going to his house and remembering the smell of tobacco, because he smoked the pipe. He also had leather chairs, there was teak furniture around, he had a bowl of beans, like cola beans, on the dresser, and so the tonka bean in the fragrance is referenced in that. There's also vetiver, which gives it kind of like a green and smoky, well, it amplifies the smokiness of it.
Can I try a little bit?
We're going to spray it on the photograph, and then we're going to spray some on your skin.
Oh yeah, I'm really getting that lovely smoky, little tiny bit sweet, and it's beautiful.
So it feels like a realistic take on tobacco.
Yeah.
Not overtly like a cigarette smoke to me. I think it's more focused around the actual tobacco that you would have in a pouch or in a jar that you would then put into the pipe or into a cigarette, which can also sometimes feel like dried fruit, like dried plum or something like that. And that's where the sweetness comes from, and the tonka also adds to that.
It's funny because it's so evocative. Once you've told the story and then you smell this amazing kind of like nuance, the layers are really there. I think the storytelling helps so much with the senses, which is really something I didn't expect to discover, even though I'm in the business of storytelling.
But this is the trajectory of how the perfumes came to be. It started with prints and patterns, me really delving into colour combinations based on photographs, and then being really curious about how you could really push the boundaries of art and make it multi-sensory by adding a sense of smell.
Do you have a sense that there's one scent for someone that they're kind of waiting to discover? If I'm a client and I come here, how would you guide me through this to find something that was suited for me?
Firstly, I think it's important to keep an open mind around what you like and what you don't like, because you can quite often be surprised. So I try and take people through the range. Sometimes it's nice to not know so much about what it is you're going to smell. And that's why the photographs, they're an indicator, and so is the name. But what happens when you smell in something that you don't have any visual connection to or anything? Then you just go in with how you feel. And then also, just to try perfumes on your skin. I think Les Fleurs is an interesting example of that. It's named after the Minnie Riperton song. And if people think that they might not be into florals, for example, and I try and challenge them around that, because Les Fleurs is green, it's fruity, it's dewy, it's nectar-like. Sure, there is some floracy in there, but it's also citrusy and cologne-like.
I have the same relationship with vanilla. I can see this scent might have some sort of vanilla base to it. How do you challenge the anti-vanilla lobby?
This is also a very good example because, like you say, a lot of people have an idea of what vanilla is. And for me, I've designed a vanilla fragrance in a way that feels familiar to me. So the cardamom is there, the vanilla is there, but it's bolstered up with cedar wood, patchouli to make it earthy, and ambergris and musk. And I describe it as a gourmand, which means a sweet, edible type of perfume, but a Scandinavian one. It's funny when you add that to it because it explains like the identity around it, you know, and how it might be treated differently to, say, someone else. We all have different ideas of what that looks like and smells like.
Can we have a spritz?
Definitely.
Who are these people in the photo?
This is my uncle, Lars. It's him with his wife on their wedding day. He was the hobbyist photographer in the family, so he's responsible for most of the photographs that we have. So vanille is very similar to Nordic cedar. The only difference is the vanilla note.
Oh yeah.
So you should be able to smell that Scandinavian forest. And
yeah, it's very fresh still. I'm starting to convert. No, it's really beautiful.
If you come with me over to the table, I'm going to share some materials with you that I like. I use them in my fragrances, so just to see what you think of them. Great. There's a few different raw materials on the table, and I think they're interesting because some of them I've used in a fragrance that I'm working on, and some of them I've chosen because I feel like they maybe represent the changing of the season, for example, and what that could mean to somebody. So this is cardamom in its rawest form, so you can have a smell of that.
Oh, wow, yeah. Reminds me of my spice cupboard.
Yeah, and it's also very green, you know, it's like crushing the cardamom pods and then getting the spice, sure, but it's also almost citrusy, and it's not uncommon for people to think that when they smell Nordic cedar that it has a citrus top note, but it's all in the cardamom. Let's see what you think of that.
Oh, wow. It's really green and kind of like rooty.
This is a frankincense.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've never smelled that on its own.
Yeah. So this is, you know, the resin that... Yeah, exactly. It's the incense. It has green elements to it. It can be quite sticky, and to me it smells resinous, but I don't know if that means a lot to someone, because I guess there's many resins out there. The smell of the resin makes me think of growing up in Sweden. We would always be poking the trees, you know, and that's my earliest memory of it. But then also I wouldn't have been around frankincense burnt in the church, for example, because I didn't spend much time in Catholic church, whereas to other people their childhood might be really like reminiscent of that smell. That's cultural as well, isn't it? So.
And what are the other more unusual scents that you think are actually really key to your own métier, your own philosophy?
Well, I've got modification here of something that I'm working on, and this is a fragrance that will come out later this year. It's based on the Gambia. I have a fragrance already which is based on the Gambia, and it's a really tropical, fruity, coconutty fragrance. But when I actually really think about how Gambia smells, you know, when I arrive and when I'm moving around and going to visit different family members and so on, it's really like woody and incensey tends to be, and that's the thing, that the incense, that's the difference between being in Sweden or in England. That's a very particular smell that's connected to Gambia, and I think anyone that's been there or is from there will know what I mean. And so this is a fragrance that's based on that notion, and it's a smell that I've created that can take you back 2,000-3,000 years back in time. And the photo that I've got also represents that. It's a picture that could be 2 years ago or 2,000 years ago.
So is that because people burn incense at home?
They burn it at home. They also scent their clothes. You know, they might be carrying incense on them. You can put incense into a pouch and then sort of tie it into your clothes. Many cultures will have incense burning, and then they'll have fabric that moves through it. You know, it's the earliest form of perfumery, really, and very much ingrained in people's cultures today.
It's really interesting to think about what you're drawn to is an instinct, but it's also, as you illustrate so well here, it's all about biography and narrative and building your knowledge as well. But it's really wonderful to kind of reflect on these moments. I just wanted to finish with this jasmine, because for me jasmine is just such an amazing escapism fragrance. I always feel like I've gone somewhere kind of wonderful. Even if I'm walking down the street in Hackney and I smell jasmine, it kind of transports me. But I wondered, what does jasmine mean to you, and how do you use it in fragrance?
Jasmine has the most intoxicating effect on me, I think. It's just that magic that it has during this time of the year, where you walk down the street and it comes like creeping up and you might not even see it, and it's just there. It makes you just want to get more from that smell, and it's very nostalgic. In Gambia at night, you know, it's like super strong and really intoxicating, and so it's just all around us at a certain time of the year, and I wanted to represent that in my range. So I have a fragrance that is called Siren that captures jasmine in bloom. The photograph is of a piece of architecture, so it's La Muralla Roja in Spain. Ricardo Bofill is the architect, and surrounding that building you've got jasmine, and it's by the sea. Yeah, it's Mediterranean, it's kind of really colourful, it's just beautiful. So I felt when I went there that it definitely needed to be captured into a bottle.
The perfumer, Maya Njie there. Thank you. Marcella, I was really inspired by the idea of a photograph as a starting point for creating a scent. It's all about emotions. Is there a photo that you own that holds a story, or even maybe a smell?
Actually, I have several ones, but one is very special. It's an old black and white photo from my mother with braids when she was about 10 years old. She's smiling proudly, holding a huge porcini mushroom in each hand, a basket full of mushrooms on her knees. The photo is taken somewhere in the Czech forest where she regularly went mushroom picking with her father, my grandfather. I love this picture. It's from a different time and place that I don't recognize, but it feels so familiar to me. I can almost smell the mushrooms, and I feel very close to my mother and my grandfather in this atmosphere. It would be a nightmare to lose this photo, and you just brought me to the idea. I should photograph it, maybe.
It's amazing to think of that. And in history, you often forget how places would smell. That's something we can't recreate, but we can, in a sense, with somebody like Maya, who really understands those trigger points, those nostalgic senses of smell, that really oblique memories.
Gillian, what would your personal scent be made of? If someone were to bottle you as a perfume, what ingredients or memories would be essential?
Oh, this is brilliant. It should be the new sort of dinner party game. What is your essence? All right, so I'm going to play this. I think it would start with rose, sort of the ancient roses that really have this incredible fragrance that you find in old English gardens. I think that would be a nod to here being in England, my love of the English gardens, and memories of my mother and my grandfather who always had rose gardens. Then it would be, you got to have a little spice in life, and I think a nod to my love of going to sort of exotic markets in India. And I think I'd choose something like cardamom, something a little exotic. I think I have to have something a little exotic in my fragrance. Maybe I'd need something a bit more soulful. So sandalwood, a little earthy, a little back to nature, that kind of would harmonise those three. I have no idea what those three would smell like, but I think they kind of reflect different sides of me.
I love the way you've just created a scent for yourself live on radio. Some people are really articulate with smell, and it's a similar thing to wine where you really can truly express yourself through these different notes. And some people are more intuitive but then can't necessarily express in the same way you just did.
I can't do it with wine. Fragrance, maybe there's something different, but I think maybe we should go now back to Njie's studio and see if she can create my fragrance. But you were there in the studio and sort of had the chance to smell and experience as her fragrances. Have you ever come across a scent that has really transported you back to a time or a memory past?
I just did, actually. I was in Belsize Park just a few minutes ago. I smelt this huge yellow rose. It really transported me back to my garden when I was little, because my mother used to have banks of roses and she'd have a party when the roses were in bloom and everything. But I think what I love about Maya is she finds things that could be pejorative smells, like an old leather sofa. Some people might not like that memory, and she transforms it into something really beautiful. So I think there's that sense of tobacco smoke and the smell of a room after a really quite big party. You're ambivalent about that smell, but she transforms it into something that's really positive. And I think that's the skill and beauty of it. We all have those memories that are just sitting there ready to be kind of slightly tweaked and peaked by the world around us. Perhaps one of London's most storied addresses is Claridge's. Known for its impeccable service, discreet glamour and distinguished guests, the hotel is also an architectural jewel of the art-deco era.
This year, the hotel is celebrating the centenary of the 1925 Paris exhibition, the very moment Art Deco was made official. So how does this architectural style reflect on site? From the iconic ballroom to the smallest sculptural detail, this is a place where history isn't preserved under glass, but is lived in daily.
Kate Hudson is Claridge's in-house curator and resident authority on all things Art Deco. Earlier, she stopped by our studio to tell me about the materials and motifs that define the era, explore how a new breed of grand hotel emerged in the 1920s, and meet some of the colourful characters who made Claridge's their second home, from Cecil Beaton to F. Scott Fitzgerald. Let's have a listen.
There's actually been a hotel in that spot since 1812, but the hotel that you see today was actually built between 1894 and 1898 by an architect called C.W. Williams for the D'Oyly Carts. The D'Oyly Carts had bought the hotel and it reopened in 1898, and the building you see today is actually the building that he built. So that's Claridge's comprises two buildings, the Victorian part and the Art Deco building. They live next door to each other. And what I think is extraordinary is actually we have now this glorious Art Deco portico, which is the front of the hotel, the entrance to the hotel. And yet somehow it melds so perfectly with the Victorian architecture. And if you go into the hotel, you know, we still have very evident elements of the Victorian architecture. We also have touches of Georgian architecture, and we have the overwhelming Art Deco, you know, the black and white floor, the mirrors, the starburst effect. You know, it's what I think is extraordinary about Claridge is that it has evolved. So you, as you say, you almost have the sense of layers upon layers of history. And because it has evolved very organically, it fits very comfortably together. You know, you have an explosion of different styles when you go into the main body of the hotel, into the lobby. You have this wonderful Victorian staircase. You have this glorious Art Deco checkerboard of a floor. And then you have a Georgian mantelpiece. And yet, overall, the space is incredibly warm. It's quite magical. And I think that is because the history, as you say, it layers upon layers, and it's become part of its character.
Now, as part of the 100th anniversary of the Paris exhibition, actually, you're planning some amazing Art Deco tours, leading them yourself. Also, Brian O'Sullivan, an Art Deco specialist, is taking tours. Give us a sense of why you're doing this and some of the very sort of hidden details, the sort of maybe overlooked details that really stand out in that Deco period.
So in 1925, the French government put on an exhibition. It was called the International Exhibition of Decorative, Modern and Industrial Arts. And they put it on because they really wanted to take ownership of that sort of, you know, very modern, dynamic, sort of, you know, almost sort of arbiters of taste, as it were. And the exhibition was a huge success. I mean, huge. It ran from April to October and then was extended because it was so popular. I mean, millions of visitors. And one of those visitors was an interior designer called Basil Ionides. He was very much the darling of London society. He was the sort of the bright aesthetic spark in London. And the hotel approached him and said, would he do some work in the hotel? So he was an absolute pioneer of this new style. So he came in and he did the restaurant and he did the Davies Street entrance and he did some of the rooms. And the reaction from the public and the press was overwhelmingly positive. I mean, everyone was talking about this sort of sense of joie de vivre that he'd brought to the hotel. So the works continued. We brought in another architect called Oswald Milne, and he was the one who actually created the wonderful, you know, entrance to the hotel. So it's hard to imagine if you don't know the hotel, but the actual entrance before it used to be a sort of granite, very sort of unassuming granite, because the horses and carriages would come in. The guests would sort of, you know, dismount and the carriage would go out the other way. So it was almost a turning circle. It wasn't really part of the hotel. So when Milne came in and he transformed it into this sort of this early part of the lobby, as you first come through the glorious revolving doors, our jousting tent revolving doors, and you're suddenly in this wonderland of mirrors and reflections and diffused lighting, and it is magical. And I think that is what makes it feel magical, because it's such a beautiful space. And in terms of Art Deco details, I mean, for me, there are so many, obviously, but for me, the Jacquardnay doves. We have a few of these perched around the hotels. These are ceramic doves which are actually exhibited, French ceramicist Jacquardnay. They were exhibited at the exhibition in Paris, and Ionides brought them over to use in the hotel. And I love them because they're extraordinary. They're just these beautiful white porcelain doves which just, you know, there's one in a little alcove in the lobby, there's one in the fumoir, and people don't even notice them. But for me, I always see them and think, there you are.
Well, let's talk about how the hotel lived and breathed in this period of deco, kind of actually hedonism in some ways. Give us a sense of a kind of sort of day in the life of Claridge's at that time.
Well, okay, so obviously with all the works that we'd had done, we had become very fashionable. You know, we were very much the sort of the backdrop for the bright young things, the haunt of that sort of group of socialites who pretty much lit up interwar London with their sort of pranks and their antics. So, I mean, our guests included everyone from Beaton to Stephen Tennant, probably one of the brightest of the bright young things, Elizabeth Ponsonby. And, I mean, they tended to emerge sort of later in the evening. And it would just be cocktails, dinner, dancing. And one of the lovely things that we had, certainly sort of late 20s, early 30s, we did these extraordinary sort of evening entertainments. And we would have everyone from, there's this glorious table card, which I actually did bring to show you. On Sunday night, Beata Bradner, the dancing acrobat, and Torino, the juggling genius, will entertain in the foyer after dinner. And I mean, I actually looked up on Pathé and I found this glorious video of Beata Bradner doing all these extraordinary sort of dancing. And we had all manner of entertainment that was taking place in the hotel. So it was a very joyful place.
I'm intrigued by sort of the intangibles that you have in your archive. I mean, we can look at architectural details, but how did the hotel smell in those days? And I know that you have a kind of insight into floristry in that era. Give us a sense of some of the kind of less sort of documented details, but equally fascinating.
Oh no, I couldn't agree more, because I am a perfume obsessive. I adore perfume. So I think what you have to really remember about this period, everything was about new. It was very modern. It was very forward thinking. So there were a lot of changes, you know. So with perfumes, the sense, I mean, for example, you know, probably a couple of the most famous scents of that time are Guerlain's Shalimar, 1925, Chanel's No. 5, 1921. And Shalimar was this very rich oriental scent, you know, and that was quite new. No. 5 was aldehydic. I mean, you know, no one had used aldehydes before. So rich, exotic, you know, unusual. And flowers too. Again, I mean, funnily enough, I was looking at some bridal photographs from that period. And certainly, you know, there's almost like a looseness about them. It's the sort of twigs and there's, you know, and it's not so, it's much more relaxed in a way. But then also within the hotel, our flower arrangements would be quite geometric. They'd be very much more in keeping with the style. So you'd either have the one extreme of the cascading petals, or you'd have the very, very geometric style. But it was all, I think everything echoed each other. It was always a sense of great modernism, looking forward.
And tell us what rituals have endured from that time. And finally, really, what are you looking forward to in this moment of celebration that is kind of a revival of sorts?
Well, I don't really think I'd say that any rituals have survived. But what I would say, and this is something I believe in so passionately about Claridge's, is there is a sense, there is a spirit to the hotel which has remained constant in all its years. It's a very warm place. It's a very welcoming place. And there is a sense of, I mean, everybody who works, it is a special, special place. I said before, when you walk through the doors, it's almost you're walking into a magical arena where, you know, you can forget your everyday worries, your quotidian, you know, concerns, and just be happy. And I think that has been maintained with Claridge's. And obviously this year we are going to revisit some of the rituals. We have got the most wonderful Bright Young Things cocktails being served in the fumoir, all in the original Lally glasses. So you can have a corpse reviver cocktail, or you can have a, you know, dirty martini. You can have whatever you want. We've got so many things happening this year which are going to be glorious. So obviously the Art Deco tours. And then we obviously have Brian O'Sullivan, as you mentioned, but we also have talks about perfume, talks about flowers, talks about music. So it's really going to be a sense of just actually trying to not recreate, we never try and recreate, but maybe just evoke a little sense of the glamour of that period. And also you have to remember that period, we look back on it as being this incredibly, you know, glamorous time. But actually, if you think it was bookended by the wars, You know, it was incredibly glamorous, but it was also very unsettled. And I think somehow maybe there's a sense that the world is quite unsettled at the moment. So a little bit of escapism goes a long way.
Kate Hudson, Claridge's Art Deco curator, speaking to me a little earlier. Thank you. And that brings us to the end of this episode of Confect Corner. My thanks, as ever, to Marcella Pallick in Zurich and Gillian Tobias for joining me here in London. Confect Corner is produced and edited by Carlotta Ribello and Steph Chungu. Remember to pick up your copy of the new summer issue of Confect Magazine or subscribe by heading to confectmagazine.com. Until next time, from me, Sophie Grove, goodbye and thanks for listening.